Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And Scott's going to bring this presentation up. When I saw my time slot today, and I was just before the morning break, I realized that if I was going to have a ghost of a chance of keeping your attention, I maybe better make it just a little different. So my presentation is just going to tell you a story, and I think it's really important that you realize this is just a fictional story, and all references to entities, people, or places in the story shouldn't be construed as a reference to a real person, place, or individual, or water rights. So here's the setup that is kind of the background for our story. Metropolis is a large Front Range city, and they have purchased the 1,000-acre farm under the Holt Creek Canal that you can see in the lower left-hand portion of this map. And since this is being videotaped, I didn't realize this was going to happen. You know, there's a slight chance that James Eklund, the CWC director, would actually see this. So Metropolis, really? Have you not read the state water plan by drive? That's passe. It's alternative transfer methods and conservation. ATMs and C, baby, come on. This example, we're going to follow through on this by drive. Now below the Holt Creek Canal, the Fort Truth Ditch diverts and takes water for either irrigation use in that area that you see just above Big Reservoir, or Fort Truth Ditch also has a storage right that they can operate and do operate in the winter. It's important to note that Fort Truth Ditch can sweep the river at their point of diversion and often does. Below the Fort Truth Ditch is Big Reservoir, a non-channel reservoir, and below that, the large Amiable Mutual Irrigation and Power Canal, which has both an irrigation right and an right for an industrial power plant. So as Metropolis moves forward with this change of water right for the 1,000-acre farm, from irrigation to municipal use, they need to be able to get engineering work. It's got a
Sorry, I'm having trouble.
Can you just advance me?
No.
No.
Try again.
Oh, there we go. So Metropolis wants to get their engineering work done for this project. They hire Walter Ivan to perform historic conceptive use analysis for their project, and as he prepares his work, Fort Truth Ditch and the AMIPC both realize they've got to protect their water rights, especially if the state division engineers aren't going to get in the case. So Fort Truth Ditch hires William Thompson to evaluate Mr. Ivan's work. The AMIPC hires Niem Danela of CC and Associates, or CCA as they prefer to be called, to evaluate Mr. Ivan's work. Go ahead.
You got it.
I got it. So Walter Ivan's analysis, Mr. Ivan is likely to take a little different path than maybe other consultants might take, because he wants to get the most for his clients. So he looks down through the diversion record history for the Holt Creek Ditch, for the Holt Creek Canal, and discovers that there's diversion records from 1931 through 2015. But Mr. Ivan chooses to use a period of record from 1931 through 1950 because that involved a time period when the Holy Sugar plant was in operation. And the Holy Sugar plant contracted with farmers under the Holt Creek Canal to raise sugar beets for their sugar processing. And so on the 1,000-acre farm, that represented a 600-acre contract for sugar beet production throughout all that period, 1931 through 1950. On that farm, 200 acres of corn and 200 acres of alfalfa on average were raised on that farm. The only problem was in 1951, the Holy Sugar Company went out of business due to the emerging artificial sweetener industry. And I know some of you may say you know history better, it's really sugar cane, but it's my story, so I'm going to blame it. So, anyway, Mr. Ivan completes his work on this period from 1931 through 1950. And he does a thorough job. He looks, in fact, he's more thorough than really what Senate Bill 183 requires. He includes years that are very dry and very wet in his analysis, in addition to just wet, dry, and average years, and shows the diversions throughout this 20-year period. And he concludes that the average farm headgate diversion for this 1,000-acre farm is 2,821 acre-feet. Now, for that period, he's got, he wants to kind of make sure he meets the standard for a representative period. So he's got continuous record. There aren't any years that he's trying to cherry pick or exclude from this 20-year period. He clearly has met the burden of wet, dry, and average years, and there's no undecreed uses. It's all irrigation. So he performs his analysis using this crop mix that he's got, and concludes that the 1,000-acre farm, on average, produced 1,900 acre-feet or 1.9 acre-feet per acre of consumptive use on the 1,000 acres. And that his annualized factors for consumptive use versus return flows are 67% and 33%, respectively. He even goes so far as to say, for a 20-year period, he's willing to accept a volumetric limit of 38,000 acre-feet due to his study. And then he concludes that there was the maximum year of consumptive use of 2,300 acre-feet decrease in the annual limit can be placed on his consumptive use. And then finally, he says that all of his return flows should be returned to the river above the Fort Truth ditch. And you might recall from the map that the surface returns clearly are showing going back ahead of the Fort Truth ditch. So he prepares the analysis using those conclusions, and that analysis then is able to be reviewed by objectors in the case. And so William Thompson, for the Fort Truth ditch, can't really figure out why Walter Ivan didn't use the full 1931 through 2015 period. And so he begins to check on what the scenario was, what have caused this change. So he checks the average farm headgate diversions for the Hope Creek Canal for the whole period, he checks for the period after Mr. Ivan's analysis, 1951 through 2015. And he finds that the farm headgate diversions are a little lower, but not significantly different. It's within 5% of Mr. Ivan's analysis, 2,675 acre-feet versus 2,821. He also checks irrigated acreage just to see if there was a significant difference there, but no, that's okay. 1,000 acres still all the way through the period. Then when he digs a little bit deeper, he understands a little better what happened. So after the Holy Sugar plant went out of operation, it was immediately replaced by the Adolph Brewery. And the Adolph Brewery contracted with farmers on the Hope Creek Canal in order to have them raise malt barley for their brewing process. And so for the entire period, 1951 through 2015, the mix of crops on a 1,000-acre farm became the same 20% alfalfa, 20% corn, but now the 600 acres on the farm were replaced by malt barley rather than sugar beets. And of course, it's still in production because there's never-ending demand for the brewery product that probably won't go away and is unaffected by artificial sweeteners. So Mr. Thompson's analysis includes the full study period, 1931 through 1950, plus the additional time from 1951 through 2015, because he argues that Mr. Ivan's 20-year period is simply not representative, that all the years of the diversion history should be included. And he performs the analysis and shows that the average farm head gate diversion, that 85-year period, was 2,709 acre feet, and that resulted in 1,700 acre feet of consumptive use, 1.7 acre feet per acre, considering the full 85 years of crop mix history. And he first concluded that the 1951 through 2015 crop mix produced the lower consumptive use of 1,700 acre feet or 1.7 acre feet per acre. And then when he combined it with the years from Mr. Ivan's analysis, he concluded that the appropriate number was 1,747 acre feet per year. And his analysis also showed that annualized factor should be 64.4% of the farm head gate delivery rather than Mr. Ivan's 67%, and the return flow component would be 35.6%. Both engineers did a good job of also having monthly factors, which are important when you're considering consumptive use and return flow. So then the maximum consumptive use for a 20-year period, Mr. Thompson didn't really have a problem with Mr. Ivan's 20-year limit of 38,000 acre feet. That had happened during the 1931 through 2015 period. He really didn't have a problem with the annual limit, but now to protect the Fort Truth ditches water rights, he wants to have an 85-year limit placed on the use of the changed water on a 1,000-acre farm. That would be 148,500 acre feet, or that 1,747 acre feet per year times the 85 years. And so now, since I know that all of you secretly wish that at some point in time you could have the power of being a water court judge, you get the opportunity to answer this first set of quiz questions as if you were the water court judge and decide what is the correct analysis that you will agree can be used. Do you think that Mr. Ivan's representative period analysis is just fine? After all, Metropolis should be able to enjoy the full value of their matured water right. Why do you want to cut them back at all? It isn't their fault that Holy Sugar went out of operation. To speak to that point, if Holy Sugar hadn't gone out of operation, Mr. Ivan's analysis would have been unquestioned. Or Holy Sugar go back into operation tomorrow, and would the Fort Truth ditch be able to claim injury from that operation reoccurring? Or do you agree with Mr. Thompson's analysis as being a better representative period? And if you don't use this representative period, not only would his client be injured, but potentially the AMIPC ditch could be injured as well. Or C, I don't think either analysis is quite right. So just to see what your opinion is, how many would say that A is the correct analysis in water court? And that's how you would judge this case. Metropolis should be able to use that. Okay.
There's an anonymous in the back.
All right, how many would think B is really the correct analysis? That's what the court should rule. A few more hands that way, and then any for C. I think it's just the DWR guys. You guys aren't supposed to be in that case anyway. You're just okay. Now that's not the end of the story. Niem Danela has to still do his analysis as well, and of course he agrees with Mr. Thompson's HCU analysis over Mr. Ivan's HCU analysis. He thinks that's going to be protective to the amiable mutual irrigation power canal. And so the one thing that he does is dig a little bit deeper on this concept of return flows. And he says, I don't think all the return flows are really out above the Fort Truth ditch. He agrees the surface return flows return to the river above the Fort Truth ditch, but he looks at the groundwater gradient associated with the 1,000-acre farm, and he concludes that the groundwater return flows were split equally above and below the Fort Truth ditch. And so he argues in his expert report that those return flows that are owed to the river should really be delivered, the portion, the groundwater return flow portion that accrued below the Fort Truth ditch should be delivered below the Fort Truth ditch. And although Mr. Ivan doesn't dispute what Mr. Danela's analysis shows, he still wants to deliver his return flows above the Fort Truth ditch because it would just be too difficult to deliver below. So here's your second quiz question. A, can you find any reason that it's not perfectly acceptable for you to use the approach that Mr. Ivan has proposed and deliver all the return flows above the Fort Truth ditch? He argues that no injury should occur. Or do you think that Mr. Danela's concern is a valid concern and that some of those return flows are really owed below the Fort Truth ditch, and then if they're not delivered, then his client, the AMIPC, will be injured? So how many for A? It's almost the same ones as how many for B? And the important consideration there was that the Fort Truth ditch can and does sweep the river at times, right? So I brought up these two topics. You may think it's kind of crazy to have that be part of an HCU analysis concept, but I just wanted to emphasize that although we really look carefully at some of the engineering calculations that are done, when a water right change is coming up, there are other factors in this representative period I still believe is a factor that hasn't fully been tested yet in court, but especially the intricacies of not just the quantification of return flows, which is the complement to your HCU analysis, but how those return flows really need to be delivered. Does it need to be daily? Does it need, is it okay to do weekly deliveries, monthly deliveries? If you have a storage season, can you lump all your return flows and make a one-time delivery? And exactly where do those return flows need to be delivered? We didn't even touch that in our guidance document because those are too case specific. Those require that on-the-ground look. I guess that's one of those situations where whether or not the state division engineers are actively involved in a case, chances are that knowledge of the local water commissioner, coupled with the ditch superintendents from the various entities involved, that's really important to gather to try to make sure you understand the physical systems and you know what the potential for injury is in the case. So I know I ran this long. I think that's all I had.
Thanks, Bill. And could you flip those two switches up that I put down next? So any questions for the panelists? Let's take advantage of these guys while we have them. Certainly. Walter? I don't know where that came from.
Well, actually, I thought you were very much out. But the thing I want to talk about or comment on is the use of calibrating, talk about calibrating grain kernel based upon Dean's memo and do it from the place where it was coefficients are provisionally. I believe if you're going to do that, you should take that paper and just provide it to the ASCE professional review. Because I read the memo and I don't agree with something. I'm biased when I work in this state. So I think it would be wise before you implement that policy to run it by ASCE and have it reviewed and see if the irrigation drainage bill and then it's set. But not doing that, I do like to hear that you are recommending local calibration of the grain kernel station. I think that's a big step forward.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I think there are a couple things. Just number one, having to see this approach to calibrating those coefficients, but the specific approach you disagree with, and maybe there's two questions before we would take an approach that should be peer reviewed and peer validated, or before we would publish it and try and pose it on others, it should be peer reviewed and peer validated. And I think that's a good question. Certainly within our office, we need to take an evaluation approach based on our expertise and judgment. And so this gets back to my discussion about our document. If we published it and said, everybody, you must abide by this, that's one thing. If we share it internally and say, hey, y'all, this is the way we're looking at issues, maybe that's a different way of looking at it, and the standard is not necessarily the way to have that peer review. So hopefully that's a good comment. Any other questions, please, panelists? The cookies will still be out there if you ask any questions, so feel free. If not, let's